Thanks, I just want to welcome you all to this event today. First of all, thank you for coming to listen to me waffle on for the next 40 minutes. What I'm going to be touching on today is mostly how humour was used in the war and after the war. So, you've got cartoons and songs that were used in the war. The time's horrible. The guys that were fighting on the front line, the privates mostly, they were generally working class blokes like myself, like everyone else in this room probably. They were just people who were working down coal pits, working in factories, whatever. So, what this talk is about is how the working classes, they used humour during the First World War, but we're going to touch on first of all like how humour was used after the war, and then go back to the war to, I'm going to show you a cartoon, I'm going to show you a song about how they used it against their own generals really, because the generals were quite callous people from what I've researched. I studied this when I was at university. I wrote my dissertation on how humour was used and how Blackadder particularly was used in popular culture. I looked at a couple of other things like Oh What a Lovely War, a few songs, a few bits and bobs there as well, and poetry from people like Siegfried Sassoon, Wilfred Owen. So the life in the trenches, it weren't no fairy tale basically. For the average Tommy, there was no real glory in the war. You were sitting in your own muck in flooded trenches. If anyone gets a chance, go to Ypres in Belgium. That was a fantastic experience for me when I was about 16. And then you start looking at the actual photographs that weren't censored, the ones that weren't sent back, and you got pictures of like soldiers, their bodies are up in the trees and their legs are in the floor and vice versa, and it was just an absolute nightmare. A lot of people in this room being Christians, it's what hell would have been like possibly, but on earth for most of these men. They had to fight against not just the enemy, but they had the bombs, the bullets, but they also had to fight against rats, hunger, floods, mud, disease. Cholera was a big killer in the war as well. So, however, what you did also get was a high command. People like Haig, French, Kitchener, they were miles away. They were behind the enemy, behind the lines. And they were sending people using these tactics that were used against, in the colonial wars in Africa, people who were armed with spears, not mechanical weapons like the German troops were in the trenches, machine guns that were just able to chop people apart. Anyway, if you'd like to click your clicker. Oh,
I'm clicking.
there you are. Oh, the clicker stopped working.
Does it need to?
Yeah, you need
Go
to.
not table?
Ah,
Yeah.
there we go. I'll click.
You're going to need to.
Yeah, you're not going to be preaching in there. So what the talk is, it basically discuss the reliability of the comedy. It's an analysis of different types of comedy. So like I say, I'm going to show you a small clip. There is some naughty words in there, so please don't be offended, but it is from Blackadder Goes Forth. There's one Saxon word anyway. A song from the time, it's going to be performed by one of my favourite bands, Chumawumba. You may have heard of them, but it is an old song that was written in the First World War called Hanging on the Old Barbed Wire, and a cartoon which you'll be able to see up on the screen. What I want you to do is finally make a judgment, maybe discuss, talk, ask questions. Let me know your thoughts at the end about what happened about what you've seen. So, comedy. How reliable is comedy is comedy as historical evidence? Well, there's a few things here that I've got. So it's like, was there ever a true word said in jest? Satire and irony, they're very effective criticisms. And these were criticisms coming from historians and of soldiers on the front line during the First World War. and people who were writing the cartoons in like Punch and so on. The jokes often have hidden meanings as well, so there's hidden meanings in some of the jokes and the songs and so on that you'll see. In order to get people to laugh though, you do need to exaggerate, so maybe things weren't as bad as what some of the things are said about the generals. People who can't talk openly often because of censorship do often turn to jokes. There would have been censorship on the front line, definitely, where soldiers weren't allowed to speak openly about their feelings about the generals, about the high command, and you can learn a lot from comedy and jokes and people's attitudes. Throughout history, comedy has been used as a way of satirising difficult situations, particularly in this country. We all look at comedy, and some of the worst situations in comedy, even sitcoms, have got some of the worst situations and we find them funny. So, Blackadder goes forth. This is a small clip in this. So what can we learn about this source, about how people viewed Haig's tactics at the time? So this first source, this isn't the film clip, this is one of the parts, this is a still from the TV series. It goes to show Captain Blackadder talking to his lieutenant. Blackadder says his instincts lead him to believe that they're at last about to go over the top. They were waiting for the orders from 30 miles behind. George, who was quite an enthusiastic person, Blackadder was more of a realist in the situation, he said, "Good Scott, sir, you mean the moment has finally arrived when we get to give Harry Hunn a darn good thrashing, British style, 6 of the best, trousers down?" Whereas Blackadder comes back with a more sort of glib, "You mean we're all going to get killed?" "Yes, clearly. Field Marshal Haig is about to make yet another giant effort to move his drinks cabinet 6 inches closer to Berlin." Now, they made a mistake there, because I know the script of it back to front, it's actually a gargantuan effort, but in that still. So, what can we learn about this source from how people viewed the tactics of Haig? The tactics, like I was saying, were cavalry-style tactics. It was charging at the enemy with rifles. The enemy had machine guns again, like I say. And there was a stalemate on the Western Front for many years. They were firing, shells, charging. There's another one where Blackadder goes to Haig's office, not Haig, Melchit's office. Say, "Oh, this is a secret plan. What, we're going to run at the enemy like we have done over the top 17 times before." He says, "Oh, how did you guess such a brilliant plan?" So, 70 years later, the writers of Blackadder Goes Forth have taken whatever sources that they've heard or researched in the past and taken it into modern comedy and satirised the generals and the people like Haig, field marshals, who were using the same tactics and just getting nowhere. So we'll carry on. So if we look at some sources though from the time, the following sources are extracts from letters by the soldiers who witnessed the shelling. So this is more of the opposite angle of the debate. So these extracts were sources written by soldiers who witnessed the shelling of the German trenches before the Battle of the Somme in 1916. One of the bloodiest battles ever, possibly, Somme. I think it was 4,000 British soldiers died in the first day. I may be wrong, but if anyone wants to correct me on that later, that's a lot of people in one go. So, what can we learn about these sources and how accurate was sort of Lieutenant George's view of how soldiers viewed Haig before the Battle of the Somme? So, these were some letters that were sent. So the first one from a private. We saw the bombardment of the Germans were getting. We thought it was a chance of getting our own back. Everyone was wildly enthusiastic. Far less men went on sick parade. Nobody wanted to miss the fight. So this is, like I said, the opposite end of the spectrum. This is a private saying that he was up for it. He wanted to get over the top. He wanted to get at the Germans. He wanted to stick his bayonets right up them, as Corporal Jones would say in a later comedy. So these are sources from the time. This is another one. Lieutenant John Parker. He wrote in a letter, "We couldn't speak, but it was an amazing show. We stood behind the lines and watched the giant fireworks in the darkness. No one could live through that." Again, this is a higher commander, a lieutenant, and he's sort of back a bit. No one could live through that. This first one is showing that the brave Tommy, the lion, was ready for the fight. He was ready to go. Whereas the lieutenant was like, "Yeah, we'll just watch the massacre happen." So what evidence is there in these two sources to support Lieutenant George's view of Haig's tactics? Quite a bit there. So if you have Lieutenant George as, say, Parker, maybe Baldrick as Williams. But Captain Blackadder, again I said he was a realist. He understood the realities of the war. He'd been fighting, he was a career soldier during the Imperial years, during the time of the Boer Wars and the previous sort of wars in Africa where they were fighting people, as Blackadder said, a sharpened piece of mango. Now we've got 1 million Germans armed up to the teeth with machine guns. So they knew that British advancing troops were just going to get cut down. The wires weren't cut, so they were getting tangled up in barbed wire. Bodies were being left there. The German trenches were partly destroyed, but the German trenches were so well built compared to the Allied trenches that there was hardly any damage to them. It's one of the tactics. If you think about it as a, say, a football match, it was like 1996 Newcastle United, attack, 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 against the Italy team in 2006, which was defend, defend, defend. And the Germans were very good at defending, and the British were, and the French were very attack-minded. But the defence seemed to hold out for a long, long time. Very well built, very good concrete trenches. So the advancing troops were mostly just ploughed down. We could go into what eventually led to the German defeat, but that is a completely different story altogether. As to why these defences didn't eventually make way. So the popular image of Haig, though, in the comedy series Blackadder. So Lieutenant George was a positive kind of character. Captain Blackadder, he was negative. Lieutenant George was always looking forward to going over the top and giving the Germans a darn good thrashing. Suggests that he expects Haig's tactics would be successful. Blackadder, again like I say, was a realist, expects Haig's tactics to be a disaster. He says, "You mean we're all going to get killed?" There we go, that's it. Sees Haig as an uncaring armchair warrior who doesn't care about the men he sacrificed to move his trench cabinet 6 inches closer to Berlin. This is a part of my dissertation I'm going to read out to you. So it's, from the very start of the series Blackadder goes forth, the men in the high command were viewed as callous, impotent, incompetent, uncaring and generally useless. This included Field Marshal Sir Douglas Haig, head of the high command throughout the war, who appeared in the final series episode of the series Goodbye. You've probably all seen that, where with the really harrowing ending. So the commanders were respected by General Sir Anthony Melcher, and played by Stephen Fry, who in his first scene of the series is viewed as a callous bungler in which he gets Captain Blackadder mixed up with an unseen character called Corporal Black, who was actually the company's barber. Melchit's character was designed to satirise the High Command. However, with references of Field Marshal Sir John French and Field Marshal Horatio Kitchener also being noticed throughout the series. Alongside this, constant cutting references are made throughout the series regarding the poor amount of land that had been acquired. According to Emma Hanna, who is an historian who studied a lot of this, the character of Melchit was designed mostly in order to represent the insanity of the war, of how many masses of people were killed for very little land gains. Brian Bond as well, another historian, explains that Melchit was created in order to resemble the entirety of the Allied generals throughout the whole war, showing them as figures of incompetence and callousness, in which signs of Melchit's callousness are observed throughout the series, such as during the episode General Hospital, in which Melchit shoots his friend Captain Kevin Darling, in the foot, in order for Darling to spy on Blackadder, who has been issued with searching for a spy in the army hospital. The entire series exploits the lions led by donkeys theory in order to produce comical results in a risque manner that led to criticism from many historians, notably Geoffrey Elton. That was the writer Ben Elton's uncle, who claimed the series was disrespectful, though in a later interview he did change his mind on things. Ben Elton responded by explaining the series was retrospectful and used a theory based on people's memories of the Great War from diaries, letters and historians' writings such as that of Alan Clark, who was supposedly the first person to have coined the term in 1961. Conversely, the term's origins are said to have dated back as far as the Crimean War. That war took place in 1854 to 1855, in which a British soldier wrote home telling of a Russian officer who supposed to have claimed that the British forces were lions led by asses or donkeys. In addition, Elton responds that the series was, if ever there was a subject that required an element of satire, it was people blindly going to war. This explains the complete running of the war, in Elton's view, who was both of German and British heritage, as the opinion of the war was conducted in a terrible manner, to the point that it was so terrible it could be used as a tool of comedy eventually. It must also be noted that during the course of the First World War, popular culture also attacked the British High Command through satire, through song and poetry, which we'll look to very shortly. And the idea of comedy being used as a tool to change opinion being a new concept of leftist writers who attacked the decisions and actions of the High Command. So the song Hanging on the Old Barbed Wire, we'll come back to that very shortly. That was one of those ways, and the picture that we'll look up shortly. But throughout Blackadder, the character of Lieutenant George is presented throughout the TV series as an over-optimistic fool. Kind of continuation from his character in the previous series. Right, find a bit. So, where I am. But then you come back to, so I've picked apart bits of the High Command. The High Command was seen as callous people, but you have the working class man, your Baldrick, your average Joe, your person like me, who works in the street, works in the factory, cleans the toilets in Aberdeen. Well, I don't work in the factory, but I did do many years ago. I don't think I'm fit enough to now. So Baldrick is a symbol of the working class. He's an innocent character. He's at war because he's been told he's got to go to war. I'm just going to show you this clip here. So this is in the very last episode. This is all about why the war began. Some people. There is some Saxon words in this, I do apologise. But this is showing the old innocence of the war people not fully understanding. To me, that represents Baldrick in the work representing like working class, the average Tommy. Represents the idea that he asked why this is set in 1917, 3 years into the war, representing why are we at war? Something happened 1,000, 2,000 miles away in Bosnia, and we're all being like shot for it. So we're being sent to this war for something that's happened over there in Sarajevo. We use the humour. It represents the horrors of the war, the realities of it. What I'm going to come back to next is the how Blackadder developed using the sources from that then. So we've got a cartoon next. I want you to have a look at it for a moment. So this is a cartoon that was published in February 1917. It was from a British magazine called Punch. I don't know if anyone's heard of that. So what it is, it's a Major General addressing the men before practicing the attack behind the lines. I want you to understand there's a difference between rehearsal and the real thing. There are 3 essential differences. First, the absence of the enemy, now turning to the regimented sergeant. And the second difference, Sergeant Major, the absence of the general, sir. So we're sending the men over the top to imminent death. And this was obviously written in the war, and this is the kind of sources that the modern popular culture would have used to satirise the war, to running historians with learning about the horrible reality of the First World War. If we click on that general there, that is General Douglas Haig, and that's who he's supposed to be representing. So, in this source, you've got it appears in political magazine, like I say, Punch in February 1917. The general is definitely meant to represent Haig in his caricature. Doesn't directly mention or criticise Haig though. Again, when I was saying censorship earlier on, humour's used to as a way of getting over that censorship, or just like saying it's caption, the absence of the general, sir. It shows that people beginning to criticise these tactics by 1917. 3 years of being shelled, being machine gunned, running into barbed wire, living in the most squalid of conditions ever known to man, were taking its toll on the British Army. It's taking its toll on all of the armies in the entire war. February 1917, the Russians decided to have a revolution then, so you can tell what had happened on the Eastern Front. By the time it had come to the Western Front, there's possibility of revolution over there. And it was a revolution that eventually took over the Germans in the end as well, in a place called Kiel, who had become fed up of fighting these wars. It's a cartoon, so it was designed to exaggerate the truth as well, so you've got the other side of it, it's the exaggeration of the truth. And over 150 generals were killed, so there were, obviously there were a minority, the generals were, so you did have the generals that were killed or captured during the First World War, so the truth in the article isn't 100%, if you know what I mean. So, the officer class, where are the privates hanging on the barbed wire, dead in the no man's land, and the officer class, they were not being seen getting their hands dirty, so that's what that was designed to put across. So hanging on the old barbed wire, this is, this is the song that I was going to talk about as well. So the song, the lyrics, if you want to find the sergeant, I know where he is. He's lying on the canteen floor. He's had a few beers and he's some of that nice Belgian Stella, is it? I think. And he's not on the front line. I'm going to play you the song anyway so you can have a listen to it. And then I'll just quickly discuss that and wrap up with discussion if you want. This is a source that was used that came from the war. It's been re-recorded and cleaned up by Chumbawamba. If you ever get the chance, give them a listen. They're brilliant, especially the later stuff. I'm not here to promote that. So this song, it was another example of how the privates were getting a bit. The normal Tommy, your average Tommy, was getting fed up with the war. It was a sarcastic attack by the privates, claiming that the men who were put in charge were never seen in the zone of combat, but they were always elsewhere, miles away. The song changes for each role of the command until the last stanza, which claims that the privates were always found dead, hanging on the old barbed wire. It was a very unpopular song amongst the high commanders. It both attacked their position of authority, it also saw it as a problem for the maintenance of morale. Also, since the war ended, it can be viewed that many, by many studying the war, as how unpopular the high command could have been amongst the troops. So, we'll just quickly go back to it all then. So throughout the entirety of Blackadder Goes Forth, we see these constant references to Haig, to the high command, put across with a message which is eventually in the final episode goodbye. I can get that up if anyone wants to watch it on YouTube. It's very, very sad, very harrowing episode. Make grown men cry kind of thing. So, eventually in the final episode, Douglas Haig, he's seen receiving a telephone call from a very desperate Blackadder who just wants to get out of going over the top to imminent death. During this scene, he's seen just playing with some toy soldiers, knocking them over, like, yeah, that lot going now. These representations are similar, of Haig, similar in the kinds of stories like John Laffin, Alan Clark, who put forward in their works which viewed Haig and his generals as nothing more than bungling butchers who cared nothing about the outcome of their troops. Following the massacre of the troops, following his orders to attack, Haig is claimed to have said, "The nation must be prepared to see heavy casualty lists," when questioning the amount of death amongst his troops, emphasising the point both by the writers, the cartoonists, and the writers of Blackadder, and people like Laffin and Alan Clark. Other sources claim that Haig and the High Command were hard-hearted, consisted of letters and war poetry written by the men in the ranks who felt bitterness and resentment to the direction of the High Command, in the extent that the same way Blackadder and also to a lesser degree that Baldrick did. Though throughout the series Blackadder shows resentment but also respect as well towards Melcher in many ways, such in the first episode pretending to be a chef feeds him a whole host of terrible foods such as cat vomit, which is one of the ones. One last one was war poet Siegfried Sassoon shows his contempt towards the High Command. I mentioned Sassoon earlier on in his poem Base Details, in which he writes of a military leader who sends his men to their deaths whilst he is guzzling and gulping the best hotel in France. A similar kind of satire to the aforementioned hanging on the old barbed wire. This is in many ways comparable to Blackadder's regular comments throughout the complete series about Melcher being secured in a chateau 30 miles behind the front line. Anyway, I'd like to thank you all for listening to me. And, have a good rest of the day.